Good morning everyone, and welcome to the second in our series of webinars focusing upon the area of performance improvement. Those of you who attended last month's webinar will know that Exceed was actually founded as a performance improvement specialist, firstly for the South African diamond industry before moving into offshore oil and gas and well management. So in other words, there's a massive amount of PI experience within this company and an impressive track record to say the least. So never a company to sit still, Exceed has recently added the field of operations excellence, or OpsX, to its performance improvement portfolio. And before I introduce you to Murray McMillan, who is our expert in that area, I'm going to pass you over to Tim Wiggum, who's Head of Performance Improvement here at Exceed, and he's going to explain why OpsX has been added to the Exceed stable and how it fits in with the company's performance improvement offering. Hi Tim, how are you today?
Hi Rachel, very well, thanks. It's great to be back with you again, doing a webinar. Yeah, you're right. The first webinar in our Exceed performance series focused on exceeding expectations in 2020 and beyond. We talked about accelerating the campaign team improvement curve and how 3 Ls can achieve that. We talked about leadership, leading indicators such as lessons learned, and letting the process work, because it does work if it is well led. We also touched on the Exceed values, which use the acronym LEAD, lead with courage, exceed expectations, act with integrity, and deliver world-class transformational results. The first webinar referenced our significant experience supporting upstream wells teams, 35 campaigns since 2005. So this second webinar introduces our recently added Ops Excellence offer. We're fortunate to have found a real evangelist for continuous improvement in production environments, and the man who inspired the Loss Management Forum, now called the Production Optimization Forum in Aberdeen. Essentially, this is a learning and collaboration group for Ops Excellence. So that's Murray McMillan. Murray joined Exceed Performance in 2019 and brought with him 20+ years of experience helping upstream production teams to unlock their potential and to deliver better production. Prior to COVID earlier this year, Murray and I were working closely to support 2 different clients' integrated assets to support client leaders to build better collaboration onshore between drilling, production, and project personnel. Specifically, we facilitated a number of workshops to identify what actions were required ahead of significant drilling activity on a production platform. And then we joined weekly meetings to track progress, to challenge the plan, and to ensure our Exceed coaches offshore were informed so that overall team progress towards a common goal could be communicated and prioritized. We see Ops Excellence as having the exact same foundation as performance improvement, but with some subtle differences, which Murray will unpack based on his frontline innovation and impact in this area. Murray is a real hands-on type of guy, and his passion relates to the simple but actionable and repeatable activities that offshore operators and onshore engineers can do daily, weekly, monthly to safely chase every barrel. Back to you, Rachel.
Great, thank you, Tim. So everybody, I guess it's time for me to formally introduce today's speaker, Operations Excellence Lead Murray McMillan, to you. Now, as you've heard from Tim there, Murray has got over 20 years of experience in providing OpsX leadership and training within onshore and offshore energy sector, from upstream to midstream, from the North Sea to Algeria, Jordan, Turkey. Murray spent the past 2 decades working for some of the industry's biggest names, including BP and CNOOC. His experience ranges from the strategic development side of things and the implementation, as Tim mentioned, to hands-on training for literally hundreds and hundreds of delegates. And his work has been recognised as driving significant culture shift within loss management and production optimisation. So in other words, he knows what he's on about, I think it's safe to say. So welcome, Murray. And before we go into the presentation itself, I've just got to ask you this, because I have been told that you have been sailing up and down the coast of Scotland, and it's a wee bit of a passion for you. And classic question, what does that hobby bring to your work, and vice versa? Are there any synergies?
Hey, good morning, Rachel. Yeah, there are definitely synergies. I guess the biggest reason for doing it is it's very relaxing and enjoyable. But yeah, we sail out on the west coast a fair bit, which is fairly serious sailing. So you need actually a lot of the planning and the preparation that we do in Ops Excellence is carried over into that as well. You've kind of got to be on your game, especially Scotland. The weather changes fairly suddenly. But yeah, and a lot of that comes back into what we do in Ops Excellence. A lot of the lessons we've learned, sometimes the hard way, sailing, come back into Ops Excellence on shore.
I had a feeling you were going to have something like that to tell us, Murray. So thank you very much. Right, I'm going to hand over to you with your presentation now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, I will share my screen here. And get into the right mode. Okay, hopefully you can all see that fine. So as many of you will know, with Operations Excellence, there are many different approaches to Ops Excellence. In some cases, this involves literally swamping your organization with a large team of consultants, which can be very expensive and very disruptive. So in these tough times that we're in just now, with restricted resources, lower margins, we believe we have an approach that is far more accessible and far more effective. So what we're going to do is we prefer an approach that is very pragmatic and hands-on and practical, and that's what I'm going to discuss this morning. So Operations Excellence exceeds that. We work with the fundamental belief that you already have a huge amount of expertise, knowledge, and potential within your teams. We bring the energy, the experience, and the passion to help you unlock that potential and significantly to improve the overall performance. Now, within Operations Excellence, there are many different facets, but this morning I'm actually just going to focus on two of these areas. So we're going to focus on frontline engagement and production excellence. So starting off with the frontline engagement, engagement is typically the toughest part of any program, getting the guys bought into engaging with it and being part of it. Quite often, especially with some of the more established operators, the guys will have been through something like this before, potentially been a damaging experience for them, so they may be a little bit cynical. So actually a lot of what we're trying to do is re-engage, get that energy back up with them, and actually try and dig out some of these great ideas that we know they have. We use a very honest approach to this. So with any Ops Excellence program, we're not going to solve everything. We're going to be focused. We're going to try and work on a small number of good, valuable improvements. And for me, in the early days of any sort of program, we try and make it personal with the teams offshore or onshore. We try and get them to come up with improvements that will affect them personally. So things that would, to be honest, will just make their day a little bit easier. Because if it makes their day easier, it starts them believing that they can actually make a difference. They can come up with suggestions. They will be listened to. Things will change. And then further down the line, as they do more and more of this, we get into situations where you get more valuable suggestions coming out. So with these improvements, certainly in the early part, we set fairly clear, simple guidelines for them. We're looking for small, simple ideas, ideally very little or no budget involved in making the improvement. And critically, the people that come up with the idea stay involved with it, so they keep that level of ownership with the actual idea. So it's not just a suggestion scheme, it's not just a list of things that you don't like. You come up with a good idea, we put it forward as a group. And Exceed, we have a few ways of doing that. We've got a great process called WorkSmart, which can be paper-based. We can also do it online. So you can come up with your idea, and it goes forward to a group, an internal group with the operator. And partly to sense check, is it a safe idea, first of all? Is it a good idea? And can we do it? Can we actually implement it? Or is there a risk it will actually introduce more issues? So you need that little bit of a sense check. And a key part of that is to make sure that we feed back very quickly to whoever initiated the idea. Because if people keep suggesting ideas and they hear nothing back, those ideas will dry up pretty quickly. So even if it's not going ahead, we'll talk to them, we'll explain why not. Perhaps we can rejig that idea slightly, and it's something that we can still progress. If it is a good idea, then we start progressing it through the system. And again, they stay involved, they keep the ownership. Nobody's doing this for them. If you've come up with a good idea, you keep it moving. For sure, you'll need some help and support, but at least it drives forward. You keep that ownership, and hopefully it leads it through to success. And success, the sharing, the success stories are a big part as well. So when there are successes, and hopefully there are many, it's nice to share that in the form of a success story, both for other teams around you, perhaps onshore, or even other assets. And it highlights around the organisation what we're talking about with operations excellence. It gives good practical examples, and it hopefully inspires a few other people to think, do you know what, I've got a similar idea to that, and I can come up with a good example there as well. And again, the key thing is just perhaps starting with small ideas. And a little example for me that I was actually sharing with Tim the other day, one of the many projects I worked on was at Grangemouth, which is a huge petrochemical complex in Scotland. One of the areas I was having a look at is actually their docks area where the small coaster tankers are loaded. And we were working with one of the guys down there, and he actually had a couple of very, very simple, small ideas. We supported them, we got them done. And if I'm honest, there was no actual benefit to the organisation. It was just something that was making his day a little bit easier and a little bit more enjoyable. But then when I went down to see him again and just check on the progress, he handed me a sheet of paper. And this sheet of paper had an idea that had been in his head for years, and it was about an easier, quicker way of positioning these tankers when they come in to get loaded, because they have to line up with the big loading arms. And he'd had this idea for a while, hadn't told anybody, but finally decided I'll put it forward. It was actually a fairly simple improvement, which again he led, and it was worth about $500,000 a year to the Grangemouth complex. So for all, we started with a very simple one that just focused on him. He ended up having this great idea that delivered, significant value to the organisation. The final point on here is sustainability. There's no point in doing these sort of improvement efforts if it's just going to tail away. So sustainability is pretty key. And our approach to that is we're working with the organisations. We will identify and develop some internal champions. And these are people that just have passion for driving forward improvements, driving forward change. It's not a role-based thing. You don't have to be a leader. It can be anybody in the organisation. In fact, again, just going back to Grangemouth, one of our best champions was a cleaner. It was just a young lady that had great insight, asked some great questions, and was very good at getting people inspired and driving ideas forward. So it could be anybody in the organisation, so long as they have the energy and the passion. And by developing these internal champions, helps build sustainability long term. As you can see in the picture, none of this looks like Grangemouth. This was actually from Jordan, out in the Middle East. And again, same concept. I've actually found working with national teams abroad, if anything, they're probably more enthusiastic and easier to engage, even than people in the North Sea. They tend to be quite hungry, usually very intelligent, and keen to embrace an operations excellence type project. So alongside general improvements and trying to get that culture of improvement through the organisation, certainly from an operations point of view, there's a lot of ongoing activity. And the same approach, the same process helps bring a higher degree of rigour and discipline to the overall process. Now, for sure, the organisation are planning and doing all these things anyway, but a lot of the learning that has come in from other parts of Exceed with the drilling and wells campaigns is the concept of advanced planning. And this is just a far higher degree of focus on these activities. Now, not necessarily every single activity on a production platform, but some of the larger ones, maybe some of the slightly unusual activities, being able to sit down and work through all the key details, almost like a mini go, no-go session, just to make sure we're covering everything off. Because I'm sure, like many people listening in today, I've been in plenty of situations where you think you've got everything covered, you think you're ready, and things get missed. I can think of occasions where we've gone to do filter changes or membrane changes. You open the box and you get a surprise. It's not the right membranes or there's not enough. So that advanced planning session hopefully gets through and throws in some very, again, practical hands-on approaches to go and check it, go and get eyes on or hands on the stuff that we've got. Do we have the right number of them? Are they the right parts? Do we have good access? All these other key things. So just being as well prepared as you possibly can be. After the particular activity, the concept of after action review is so powerful, and it's something that we use across a whole range of activities. If the activity is going well, that's fantastic, but it's good to understand why did it go well and how can we repeat that. Sometimes the activities that don't go so well, that's where the better learning is. So again, being able to interrogate that and find out what didn't go well, how can we improve on it next time, and how can we share that around the rest of the organisation. And that's the final part on here. The learning and sharing is absolutely key. So again, one of our platforms is a superb tool called iVision, and this is a great way to bring all the good learning from after action reviews, the planning process together. We can have documents, videos, photographs, and again, we're big advocates of using photos and videos to capture that learning and share it in a very, very effective way. You know, for example, if you've had to build a scaffold structure to get access to a particular job, you've now got that nailed down. It's a great structure, it's in the right place, right design, right access. Get some photographs of it. Then next time you need it, it's easy to sit with the scaffold team and say, we need another one of these, exact same design. And that sharing is fairly key, because obviously with different shifts, it may be a different shift doing this activity next time. You may be able to share this with other platforms or other parts of the organisation. So again, that learning and sharing is absolutely fundamental. My little quote at the bottom here from Benjamin Franklin actually relates slightly back to my sailing passion, but I think it's very key to operations in general. Watch the little things. A small leak will sink a great ship. And I certainly see this in a lot of the assets that we work in, especially the older assets. You get a bit of mission creep, things just get a little bit sloppy, a little bit tired over time. And it's quite often the combination of a lot of small things that will cause you problems. So essentially, sweating the small stuff, staying focused on these small issues, combined will make a big difference to the overall performance. So the second segment we're talking about is what we call production excellence. And this is all about more barrels. I've been very lucky over the years to work in a few big organizations that are very good at developing a barrel chasing culture. But it's sometimes surprising just the lack of awareness around production performance. One of the super majors I worked for, I was based in their Aberdeen office for a while, and I was amazed at how few people in a very large office understood our production performance, what we should be producing, what we were actually producing, and what the losses were, and therefore the opportunity. And that went up through leadership as well. And one of the things we did, and you quite often try to visualize the production in a way that people will understand, because we get blasé with barrels of oil or scuffs of gas, or even harder to get your head around. And you know, people have compared it to Olympic swimming pools or Wembley stadiums. What we did, we tried to make it a little bit more personal. So this office in Dice, it's a beautiful big office, big glass atrium. We calculated how often we would fill the glass atrium with unplanned production losses. I'll not tell you how often it was, but it was a very regular basis. And I remember some of the leadership at the time saying it really stuck in their head when they were walking into that atrium in the morning. They could almost visualize it filling up with all this lost oil that we were wasting for a bulk of reasons. So being able to visualize it is fairly key. Again, developing that barrel chasing culture throughout the organization. Now, actually understanding the losses is quite key as well, being able to break them down and understand them. Again, working on other operators where we've had actually very, very big production, we still chased every single barrel and we still tried to understand every single loss. And one of the big revelations we had with one of these operators was actually breaking down losses into an event. So you've typically got the initiating issue, potentially then cascade losses on the back of that, and inevitably there will be startup delays and ramp-up delays. So being able to separate these things out and break them down and understand them all individually is fairly key. And again, a good understanding of root cause analysis, being able to identify the genuine root causes. And I've seen so many times in the past where people will almost jump to the easy conclusion, the initial conclusion. One that springs to mind is working down the southern North Sea. I just happened to be offshore for a few days when they had an issue. Did a compressor trip, took the platform down. So I saw the loss report come in and it was blamed on the compressor. So the fact I was there, I thought I'll go and be nosy and just have a little look around. So I went out with one of the techs to try and figure this out. And it wasn't a compressor at all. It had actually been an instrument issue, given a false signal and it tripped it. So we had a look at this instrument binnacle and it actually looked fine. Tech couldn't find any issues with it, no loose wires, no water ingress. And then another tech was walking past and he was able to enlighten us. So we'd had a period of bad weather, it had been extremely windy. What had actually happened, there was an instrument case nearby, a big metal instrument case, and the door of this case had blown off in the wind and had clattered the instrument binnacle, giving the false reading. So we were now able to tie it back to the door of the instrument cabinet. When you looked at the cabinet, instead of a catch, it had a bolt with a bend on it that was holding it in place. And it was one of these embarrassing situations. It had been like that for a long time. The guys hadn't fixed the cabinet, they just put a bolt in and that worked. Unfortunately, strong winds, the bolt had fallen out, door came off, shut the platform down. So it's important to understand what is the real root cause. No point going and spending a lot of money in a compressor when we can spend $20 and fix an instrument cabinet. On the back of that, clear and simple reporting, being able to visualize and share that information in a clear and simple way. Again, a big lesson over the years, the higher up the organization you go, typically the simpler you want the reporting to be. They like clear and simple visuals to understand that. So again, this should be very valuable business intelligence. If you have a good barrel chasing culture, you understand your losses, and you can report that in a clear manner, that is fantastic intelligence for the organization. In saying that, there's also a lot of value in looking beyond the metrics. One of the big operators I worked here in Aberdeen with, actually the biggest production in the North Sea, and actually with very, very good production efficiency. And there was a danger that we got a little bit comfortable with looking at those figures. And we created a tool called Production Health, and it looked behind the initial figures. It took a lot of other feeds from maintenance, from equipment out of service, from a lot of other valuable feeds coming into the platform. And it helped us build a picture of the health of the production system on each asset. And that was very valuable. I remember sitting in a leadership meeting where everybody's congratulating themselves on fantastic production efficiency. And we then put this, it's literally a visual of the platform, we put it up on the chart. And it's a traffic light system, red, amber, green. There weren't very many greens on this chart, there was all reds and ambers. So the very powerful message that, yeah, our efficiency today is very good, but there's a lot of risks and vulnerabilities out there. So good, valuable insight helps decide where are we going to put our resources. Now, alongside production, a lot of assets have water injection. And again, I've worked with quite a few assets where water injection was absolutely key. And again, same concept, chasing every single barrel. It might just be a barrel of water, but it's every bit as valuable. And with this particular operator, this was a major revelation. They had a couple of assets with actually fairly poor water injection performance, hadn't been what it should be for a few years, and there was now significant voidage, which was affecting reservoir and therefore production performance. And they made a decision that was inspired, was to talk about water before oil. So in every single report, every meeting, every communication with offshore, we spoke about water first and then oil. And it reinforced just the importance of that water injection performance. And the chart I've got on here is a demonstration of this. This is from one particular asset. It's called a blood on the wall chart. You can see the horrible red blood coming down there. That's your losses. The blue is actually the water injection, so that's the good stuff. So very visual, you can see there's a lot of blood in the chart, especially in the early stages. This particular asset had a big problem. This was a 2-train water injection operation. And as you can see from that, probably the first quarter, almost the first half, really struggled to get both trains running consistently. It was either one or the other, forever tripping and falling over. A lot of pressure came from above to get this sorted out because we knew if the water injection wasn't improved, this asset was actually on plateau at the time, so the daily impact was negligible. But we knew in time if we didn't address it, we would come off plateau early, and that's a bit of a disaster for your forecasting and your production in general. So a lot of effort into addressing these issues and just a general operations excellence approach to it. Sweating the small stuff, chasing every single little issue in here, chasing every barrel. We've put in place a very robust production cycle we sat on a weekly basis with the correct team to drive this forward. I was fortunate enough to facilitate this. I chaired the meeting on a weekly basis, and it's the one meeting that the field manager refused to ever change. He wouldn't miss it, and he wouldn't allow anybody else to miss it. So it was a very powerful message to his OIMs and his supervisors offshore to attend this. So we always had the right people onshore and offshore discussing the key issues. What had we done in the past week? Had we made good progress? What were the next? Actually, we usually had a top 5. What's our top 5 for the week ahead? Just a small list, but we made sure we tackled it every single week. And you can see by the chart, we actually had a great result. Injection increased, we actually even increased the capacity. The performance improved significantly. And you can see by the right-hand side of the chart, we're in fantastic performance. These losses at that stage were actually planned issues to take down and do some membrane changes and some cleans. So good losses in a way. And actually the observant amongst you can see it tails off very slightly at the right-hand side. That's because the reservoir engineers were delighted with the additional pressure they now had in the reservoir, and we were able to back off slightly and just reduce the actual injection levels. Now, this was a whole bunch of people did this. This was a whole team offshore and a large group of people onshore helping. And a key part of this was actually the whole team involvement, especially offshore. Every single person in that platform knew the need to improve water injection, knew the value of it, and knew that they all had a part to play in helping improve that over time. Almost regardless of your trade, you had a part to play. And this was hammered home at the tail end of this, because we stopped having these regular meetings. We took them back to monthly rather than weekly. We stopped so much communication because really we tackled the issue. And the field manager was out doing one of his regular visits to offshore, and he was challenged by one of the team as to why we weren't talking about it, why it wasn't in everybody's faces quite so much. And field manager had a good answer, was able to explain why that was. But what really stuck with him was the person that challenged him was a chef. This was a chef in the galley challenging the field manager as to why we're not promoting water injection quite so much. So great example that has completely permeated through the organisation. And from a production benefit, we managed to stay on plateau an extra few months, worth probably north of about $15 million to the organisation. So huge success, and that doesn't even take into account all the trips and upsets and spare parts and interference with the maintenance teams. So a massive success. So finally, Tim actually touched on the values here at Exceed at the start. I'm just going to focus on the very last one there. The key for us, this unlocking the potential, driving operations excellence, driving production excellence, is all about delivering transformational results, adding a huge amount of value. Now, obviously in a fairly short webinar, we can only scratch the surface on what we offer and the successes we've had in the past. So we're more than happy, if you want to learn a little bit more, get in touch with either Tim or myself, and we'd be delighted to pull together a bespoke session with yourself and look at a little bit more detail about maybe some of the challenges with your particular operation. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand back to Rachel. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Murray. That was great. I see Tim's put out another call for questions. We had a couple in before that during your presentation, and I think the most obvious one that's come in, and it's what I would probably like the answer to as well. You actually gave quite a few examples of hands-on, face-to-face improvement activity, but as this question says, given the restrictions on travel and contact, how would that affect the coaching support? Is there a way of doing this in amongst the restrictions? Yeah,
great question. I guess for me, being perfectly honest, there's no substitute for face-to-face, actually physically being there. I think will always be the best. It's much harder now, not impossible, but much harder. But I guess my experience at Exceed and a lot of other places, a lot of us are very comfortable with working through video conferencing and having these types of calls and these types of support conversations. And I think we've got a lot better, even from coaching, being able to do it from a distance. We have the internal tools, we've invested and developed tools that will support that. So yes, not being there is not ideal. I think there's no getting away from that. But there's a lot of positives as well. You can actually make it even more effective. doing it remote. You can pick and choose your time, you can cover more assets. So yeah, not ideal, but absolutely achievable.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, Rachel, we've been saying that one of the silver linings to this dark cloud of coronavirus has been the familiarity we all now feel with digital platforms and collaboration platforms. And so the ability for a coach to bring objectivity, to bring accountability partnership to offshore teams, even virtually, is very much there, and we're more familiar with it. So the concept of expertise, objectivity, external accountability being brought to bear to the benefit of a team and an operation has arguably been enhanced thanks to our familiarity with digital collaboration platforms.
Whether we like it or not, in my case.
Yeah.
Okay. Something that I would think would be a fairly wide-ranging question to come in is asking about cutting costs versus investing in something like this. Actually says, our business is focused on cutting costs right now and is unlikely to want to finance a large-scale change initiative. So is there an alternative approach?
Yeah, I'll take that initially and then maybe hand over to Tim. Yeah, there's some smart ways to do it. I think the key thing there is to focus on the value rather than the cost. There's always, you can do almost a light touch version. Is maybe more acceptable in the current climate. But I think it is very key, especially with senior leadership, is what are you trying to achieve? And actually, I shared a story a few days ago that's maybe pertinent to this. I worked with BP many years ago in another downturn. The message around Aberdeen and for all the UK assets was don't spend any money. We can't do anything. And as part of one of the operations excellence efforts, we identified a phenomenal opportunity, but it needed $1 million. So it was a kind of tough ask. We asked the leadership in Aberdeen, were told very firmly, no way, you're not getting $1 million. By pure chance, one of the guys in our team was actually quite friendly with Lord Brown, who was the boss at the time. And Paul was ballsy enough to go down and literally knock on Lord Brown's door and put in front of him, here's the opportunity. And Brown immediately supported it because it had a big payback. But he was quite concerned about why nobody else had seen that. And what came back to him was, you're telling us not to spend money. And he was quite angry. He said, I never said don't spend money. I said don't waste money. Look for value. If you see good opportunities, I will always back you up. So sometimes the message, especially in times like this, gets missed. That I can't imagine many leaders won't spend good money. For sure they don't want to waste, and yeah, everybody's cutting costs. But if there's a good investment, it's always a good investment.
Yeah, great point. And I would add to that if an organization is focused on cutting operational cost, which of course many will be at this stage, my challenge would be, can you afford not to leave no stone unturned in investigating a deliberate improvement initiative which focuses in on efficiency, cost reduction, team building and team organization, such that we accelerate the learning curve and address any challenges that come up. So I agree, it's all about the value. And for me, if cost cutting is an imperative, you need to look at external expertise and support to at least have a conversation with about how others have achieved cost reduction in these challenging environments.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sort of best practice sharing situation for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the third question that's on the list, and well, it's not actually the third in the list, but it's on the list, but I'm going to ask it because selfishly it's something that I'm very interested in, and it's something that is actually, I think it climbs up the agenda during every downturn, but it certainly has at the moment, is somebody's asking about decommissioning. Our organisation is actually looking to decommission activities rather than improve operational performance. Where does Operations Excellence sit in that environment?
Do you want me to take that first, Murray, and then I'll pass it on to you? Decommissioning is an excellent topic for this conversation, Rachel, so I'm glad you passed on that question. We found as we emerged from the last downturn, 2016, 2017, that organizations could delay their decommissioning activities no longer. The steel in the North Sea had to be removed. And of course, there's no return in decommissioning. It's not as though there's any production to provide a return on that investment. So the big focus for decommissioning is actually about saving against the budget. And therefore, it's imperative that teams are looking at what they can do to pull the team together, accelerate the learning curve, and save against the budget. And of course, they've also got to do that with their reputation intact. They've got to do that in an environmentally compliant way. Obviously, safety is always at the forefront, and efficiency is especially important in decommissioning. So for organizations that are addressing abandonment and decommissioning activities at the moment, I think it's especially important to consider all activities that will help build a strong team in readiness for the campaign, and then to implement the right steps and the right leading indicators to make sure that planning, review, learning, and ultimately execution and performance is optimal. Murray, what would you like to add?
All I would add to that is yeah, it's a different part of the life journey of an asset, but I would say the same approach, the same tools are absolutely relevant. I would imagine anybody decommissioning is always keen to make it safer, quicker, smarter. So yeah, exactly the same. And the nice thing for us, the same coaching approach, same tools, 100% relevant.
Okay, thank you. Interesting to me personally as well. And final question, and this is a bit of a cheeky one. Why do we need external consultants telling us what to do?
Murray, you go ahead, and then I'll have a stab.
You know, I think probably every project I've been on, every platform or asset I've been on, you get asked the same question: why do we need you? Which is always a tough question to get asked when you just arrive. Do you know the honest answer is you shouldn't, but reality is you do. I think there's massive value in having that independent external support. And certainly from the way we work, it's not about coming in and telling them what to do at all. If you think back to the very first slide, it's about unlocking the potential. We absolutely work with the belief that the potential, the knowledge, the expertise is already there. But quite often just the daily grind, daily business gets in the way of unlocking some of that. So bringing in the skills and the passion and the energy to help unlock that and improve the performance is massively valuable. So yeah, you shouldn't need it, but reality is it makes a big, big difference.
Spot on, Murray. And just to add, yeah, you know, telling what to do, that ties in a little bit more with training and mentoring. And that's a separate value proposition that organizations and leaders may choose to invest in. Coaching is much more about creating the conditions for excellence to flourish and creating the conditions for everyone's voice to be heard, for challenge to be made. And a big part of it is actually pulling a team together. So when that question gets asked, it's often by technical experts who quite rightly are very proud of their career and their experience, and they potentially feel that there's no need to invest in outsiders who don't know as much as them about the technical aspects of their job, and that's 100% correct. Our expertise or an external consultant's expertise is often around building a team, bringing people together, making sure that the people that are supporting those leaders understand what the expectations are of them. So creating conditions for good planning meetings and good review meetings where everyone's voice is heard, everyone feels that they're part of the team, one team on the same bus going in the same direction. So the people aspect, the team aspect is often something that people that ask that question haven't necessarily considered in its entirety. The other point that I would make in response to that kind of excellent question, particularly during this time where price of oil is low and there are lots of challenges facing organizations, is that organizations like Exceed, we are very proud of our track record and our expertise in ops excellence and performance improvement. In other words, we've invested a lot of time and effort, and we've listened very closely for many years now to what enables outstanding performance. So we are specialists in this area. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that you're not necessarily a specialist at pulling a team together, often at short notice, with a new work scope, facing lots of challenges where you're very busy. There's nothing wrong with accepting that you can look outside and finding specialists in that area. And two other aspects which you might consider. One is the accountability, because often ops excellence or performance activities are added onto a job description of a young engineer and don't get the necessary time and focus that's required. So accountability to actually take this on as a full-time role to drive ops excellence and performance. And the other one is objectivity. So why you might consider consulting with an outside organization is that they would be unaffected by internal politics, by history, legacy, previous relationships. So that objectivity brought in by an external consultant, where we would come in and just look at the challenges as they emerge and work with the teams to address them at face value, being uninhibited or unaffected by background politics, background issues, which may affect the lens that we take on those particular issues. And indeed, the objectivity in implementing a proven process, which can facilitate accelerated learning, improved ops excellence, better performance improvement, because we know the steps that work because we've implemented them in so many environments. And we can bring that objectivity, that accountability, and that expertise to benefit for organizations.
Great, thank you, Tim. Well, everyone, I think timing-wise, if we're going to stick to our promises of 45 minutes, that just about wraps up today's webinar. Obviously, we do appreciate all the questions that you submit, and those that we haven't answered today. I know that Tim and Murray will endeavour to address those either in future webinars or possibly within some of the articles that get published on LinkedIn. But in the meantime, if you would like to find out more about operations excellence, then I would suggest that you reach out to Murray and Tim direct for an in-depth conversation. I think what's been clear from Murray and from Tim's answers later on today is that now is definitely a good time to consider all options for cost reduction, even if that does mean that a bit of investment is required. But hopefully the ideas put forward today will have provided a wee bit of food for thought on that basis. So keep an eye out for the next webinar in the series, and until then, take care, stay safe, and thanks for coming along today. Bye.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. Cheers, Murray. Cheers, Rachel.